Welcome to another episode of the We Have a Meeting podcast. Today we're joined by a returning guest, backed by popular demand, a coach, a chief revenue officer, a founder, a thought leader. The list goes on and on. Currently, he's helping principled enterprise sellers grow sales without friction. Today we're joined by one of our favourite people. It's Mr. Marcus Cauchi. Marcus, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm on a bit of a health kick at the moment. I've lost 10 kilos since the 2nd of January. And I'm feeling slightly smug and confident that I can actually accomplish what I intended to. So I'm feeling very happy.
Will that make you more pleasant, or will you be more...
I don't know. I have this ludicrous self-concept that I am quite pleasant, but my public persona is one that I'm a bit scarier than that.
Well,
I think I'm cantankerous and frank.
Well, let's find out. So for anyone who missed our previous conversation or perhaps doesn't know you, can you tell us who you are and perhaps the problems that you solve?
Yeah, I've been in sales since 1987, I think. So, I don't know, 35 years, something like that. And the first 17 years, if I'm being perfectly honest, was 1 year 17 times over. I didn't really learn a whole heap. I mean, I did try, and I read avidly, and I was involved in all sorts of attempts to try and better myself. But by and large, I didn't do a very good job. And then I realized that I was the problem because I was making it about me and my concerns. And the last 17, 18 years, I've really been trying to understand the fundamental question: why do people do what they do? And it's been this passion project. I always, my self-concept isn't as positive as it should be, perhaps, but I always see myself a bit like a gargoyle on a church, just watching everything going by and observing. And I'm fascinated by human beings. And as I've grown older, I've worked across 500 different segments of the market, selling everything from multi-billion-dollar defense through to naked platters, female fantasy fulfillment coaching, kidnapping women off the street, taking them to a Casbah where they get pampered for 4 weeks while their lover goes on a treasure hunt all over the world trying to find them. Wow. And everything in between those two. And what I've discovered is the problems are almost always identical. The number of zeros differ. And the language and the context may vary, but human beings, they're fundamentally the same.
Well,
go on.
Let me ask you on that then. So why do people do what they do? When you started that journey, what did you think was the answer to that question compared to what you now know?
In all honesty, at that time, I didn't really care because I was more worried about hitting my quota, keeping my job, keeping my bosses happy, outside appearances, and other shit like that. And the net result of that is that if you're successful, then often, in order to continue succeeding, you start having to cut corners. You start having to compromise your values in order to keep your fundamental human needs still being met. And for me, that was something that always jarred because I don't know whether I'm not in any way religious, but I was brought up with a strong moral compass. And when I looked around and I saw the abuses that were going on, starting with the customer, it offended me that salespeople were being proactively encouraged by their management to say things that were untrue, to exaggerate, to omit stuff that was relevant to the buyer's decision, to exaggerate their capabilities, to sell things that they weren't capable of delivering. So these people weren't paying attention to the effect that they were having on their customers. And I genuinely, fundamentally believe selling should be the most noble thing we do in our business. My definition of selling is facilitating the right decision by the buyer for themselves, for now and the future, whether it involves me or not. I'm long-term selfish. I'm happy if they don't buy if I was the wrong solution. I'm deeply dissatisfied if I was the right solution And because of my ineptitude, I allowed them to outsell me. Because I take that very personally.
So based on that, a strong final no is just as good as a strong final yes.
Oh, God, yeah. Well, it's the second best possible outcome. But it's better than a maybe or a think it over or a ghosting. And part of the problem is that most of us are afraid to go for the no. Most of us are afraid to hear no. Some of the worst advice I ever received was from my first sales trainer, a lovely guy called Nick Nicholson, we used to selling concrete to Cemex and people like that, or on their behalf. He taught me some really bad things. And it wasn't out of badness, it was just the culture. The first thing he said was always spend more than you earn so you stay hungry. That was terrible advice. You can imagine for why, because I'm 55 and got nowhere near the pension provision I should. Yeah? So don't follow that advice. Fucking awful. Bad. Okay? Save. Deliberately save and have at least 3 pots of money. One, you save up until you could survive 3 months without a paycheck, which wipes out 98% of all salespeople, because most of them are still paying off a jar of Nescafe they paid on their credit card in 1986 from Safeway, which doesn't exist anymore. So, 36,000% interest they've paid by now on that jar of Nescafe because they didn't have a pot to piss in at the time and they paid it on a credit card instead of cash or debit. So that's the first bad bit of advice. And the second was don't ask closed questions. Closed questions are fabulous. They're directional. They help you get to a yes or a no, forward or stop. But the problem is that most people who teach you that piss advice don't understand how to respond when someone gives you a no. I love a no. 80% of my income comes after someone has told me no. So I want a no as quickly as humanly possible. I want to get that out of the way.
Our whole process is built around that. There's a lot more. I'm sure you've read Chris Voss's book before, haven't you? But there's that thing around the safety in no. Forcing someone into a yes starts to get you back up, but that safety and room to say no, you have a lot more of an authentic conversation.
Well, we have a tendency to be fixated on the stuff that's top of mind. But if top of mind is doing our meeting target or hitting a revenue number, where's the customer? Because they're not even in sight, let alone in mind. And they're just a forgotten afterthought. Well, that's not how people really buy. I mean, you're all buyers. You bought shit. Okay? When a salesperson is trying to dip their hand in your pocket, do you think they're a bit of a twat? Right. Well, why do you think any of your buyers would behave or believe or think or feel any differently? Okay? So we've got to stop thinking about us and we've got to start thinking as our buyer.
Yeah. 100%.
We need to understand their journey. They're not all the buyers. I mean, if you sell to enterprise, chances are there is a buying committee of somewhere between 6 and 16 people, averaging in this market probably around 11 or 12. And some of them are influencers, some of them are recommenders, specifiers, technical buyers, user buyers, mobilizers, champions. There'll be financial buyers. There'll be final authority. Now, if I were to ask almost any salesperson who fulfills those role functions in the buyer's buying process, almost none of them could give me an accurate answer because they wouldn't have thought about it or asked. But from the buyer's perspective, that's kind of important. Their agenda. What is the job they are all trying to get done, that they're all working towards? What job do they all serve, and what is their individual role in executing that job? Where are they in their buying journey? Are they making space because they've realized there's a problem? Are they passively looking, trying to learn how? Are they actively looking where they're working out what their options are? Are they deciding where they're making trade-offs? Do we have 5 bedrooms or 4? Do we need a second bathroom? All that kind of stuff. How big does the garden have to be? Can we do without that view? Yeah? That's how people really decide. They decide what they're going to do without from all the other stuff. and what's left is what they keep. Then first use. Does their expectation match the reality? Because if not, all of those frustrations and anticipated buyer's remorse that were holding them back and causing them to ghost you and not respond have now come to reality. And the brain's default setting, whenever there's uncertainty or ambiguity, is worst case scenario. Oh, the sky's falling on my head. Yeah? And then there's ongoing use. This is where you form habit. This is where you expand accounts. This is where the real money is. But everyone's focused on top end, top of funnel, new business. Do you know that you make 64 times more profit? 64 times more profit from an expansion customer than you do from a new customer.
64 times?
Yeah, and Banksas did a study in 2019. Average for new business was 18% gross margin. For upsell, 170% gross margin. For retention and expansion sales, 1,150%. You pick.
Wow.
Don't know about you, but I'm intelligently lazy. Karl von Clausewitz would hire Prussian officers for being intelligently lazy. Minimum effort, minimum loss of life. I hire salespeople for the same thing. I want them to think, how can we do less but better on purpose? What can we do? How do I double my income for half the work? That's the kind of rep I want to work with. How do I make my customer's life easier and it costs us less to deliver and have less friction for my customer? Because what most people do under pressure is their prefrontal cortex switches off and they go into their limbic brain. And they don't make good decisions when they do that. So my thesis is that if you're prepared and you understand the scenario, the context in which your customer is operating, it's very unlikely that they're going to ask you anything original. So everything can be planned for. And if you're a listener, let me ask you this. In all the time you've worked in this current role, have you ever been asked an original question, been given an original objection, been asked an original request for information? Because the odds are 1 in 10,000 of you has a yes to that answer. And it was something so anomalous, it's very unlikely to happen again. Okay? So you can prepare for every scenario. You can prepare for a prospect who is positive, neutral, or negative, with high, medium, or low influence, and it has high, medium, or low impact on them. And you can do all of those scenarios. I run something called the practice lab. And the practice lab is where we bring these real life scenarios and you get to practice being the buyer, the seller, and you get to observe while other people do the practice. Okay? And you learn more from being the buyer and from being the observer than you ever do as a seller. But then you get to practice it. Because no one wants to learn stuff in theory. Because you've heard the maxim, in theory and practice are the same, and practice they're not. Well, you need to practice this stuff so that you've got the scar tissue, so you know how to use it in context. I taught some brilliant technique over the last 20 years. It was lovely. But the problem is, if you use it in the wrong context, you sound like a total arse. Okay? A negative reverse sell is a fantastic thing applied judiciously and gently in the right context. But if my response to your question or your answer is, well, it sounds like you don't want to make a profit, I sound like a twat. Now, how often have people been given these techniques and then they use it as a bludgeon, a cudgel, a cosh to beat people with? Buyers don't want to be beaten into submission. Why don't you just make them your ally? Why don't you be their ally? Why don't you help them accomplish what they want? They'll take you wherever you want. My favorite thing with partnering What is it my partner already sells a lot of, that they make a lot of profit on, that they would love to sell more of? Okay, how do I find a way to make sure that by selling me, they sell more of that more easily?
Yeah, beautiful. There's some industry questions that we wanted to get some insight from you on. So, I mean, I've not been in sales nearly as long as you. I've been in it for about 10 years, but it feels like it's changed massively even in that short period of time. And even in doing this job where I'm part of lots and lots of people's sales processes, there's all this new tech. They've split the sales cycle up into different roles in different ways. So like SDRs, A's, I don't really think that was a thing when I first started off. My question to you is, the changes and the changes that are ongoing, are they good or bad?
Again, it depends on how you respond to them. Yeah, it's the old thing about how you look at something. Do you have... Oh, I've frozen for some reason. My video's back. Okay. It depends on how you frame things and how you respond to circumstance. So you can look at the changes that are coming and you can be terrified, and justifiably so, because AI is a brutal force when applied by someone who knows what the hell they're doing. But I don't think you're going to be replaced by AI. I think you're going to be replaced by someone like you or I, equipped with AI and the right set of questions and the right thinking. I'm playing with ChatGPT at the moment as a research tool. Now, in the past, I do this wonderful exercise. There's a tactic called a Chinese menu, where you ask someone a question, and there's, in Chinese takeaways, you've got a starter, a main course, and a side dish. Okay, so you ask a three-part question, and it's, would you do A or B or something else? Would you like A or B or something else? That's the framework. Well, if you want to really get to understand your customer, I like to do this exercise with my clients where they go 5 layers deep. Okay, so you take one objection and then you go the next layer deep. So are you saying that because of A or B or something else? And then they give the A or B, and then something else could be something random. And then you have to go down that next level for all 3 of those responses, and then again, again, and again. And by the time you've done it, you've learned 125 different ways to handle the problem through the customer's eyes. Okay, really powerful. But with ChatGPT and technologies like this, I can shorten that whole process because I can then inform it with the right question, which means that I can start to scenario plan. So for things like pre-morteming, most of your listeners won't be familiar with this concept of a pre-mortem. A pre-mortem is, imagine it's the day after the customer has announced the winner of this competitive bid or whatever, and we haven't won it. Why not? Okay, and I want to debrief that 6 months before that actually happens, because I want to know how I'm going to win it by working out what not to do. Okay, Michelangelo was asked, how did you know which piece of marble to pick? And how did you make such a wonderful piece of work with the David statue? He said, oh, that was easy. I just took out the bits that weren't David. Yeah? Well, most of what I do is taking out the bits that aren't your future. It's working out, what are you doing upstream that causes downstream negative consequences that you never intended? So, for example, many of your listeners, I suspect, are doing cold, outbound motions. You guys. Okay? And most people think that doing that, what you're looking for, is a customer who's going to land this quarter or next. It's all about the transaction. You're trying to look for someone who's ready to buy. Well, that's a motion that has a 97 to 99% guaranteed failure rate. So it begs the question, is there a better way? So my thinking on this is, how do I only attract the 3%? And if I can't only attract the 3%, how can I attract the next layer down, which is around 40%, who are passively looking and not ready for a sales conversation today, but will be in the future and will become part of my 3%. Okay. Now that's a more intelligent way of approaching it, because if I can cut out the 97% of dead time and I can use 80% of my time to work on the 3%, nurturing, going deep and wide, really understanding what they're trying to accomplish, and maybe work 5 of those accounts a quarter. And then that means I do 20 in a year, where I've got in-depth, deep relationships. There's a guy called John Bedwani, who you guys should definitely check out. He runs a company called the Database Company in Australia, been going 30 years. And he builds pipeline 3 years ahead for his clients. He's talking to customers who are going to be customers in 3 years' time, but he's doing all the softening up and the spade work and the relationship building and the insight gathering, the fact finding, the connecting and the multi-threading. So by the time a rep turns up for an appointment, that's a properly qualified lead. I mean, how many listeners would kill to have a lead like that? 3 years in the making, properly briefed, everybody identified. You're on mute.
I think the answer to the question is a lot of people would kill for that. So obviously I'm thinking about clients that we've got when you say that. I think if I went to someone and said, we can generate you new stakeholder interest, new prospects, whatever it may be, but it'll be in 3 years' time, it might be a tricky conversation to have. But I'm guessing you'd tell me that it perhaps wouldn't be.
Well, it is, but that's in stages. You have to start in stages. It's a flirt. Then it's a seduction process. Then it's a courtship. Yeah? And then it's a marriage. Okay, you've got to think of it in these terms, because if you don't, then you're going to jump too far ahead and you don't have consent. The problem is that too often salespeople are trying to push the buyer into their sales process. And this is where playbooks, they're brilliant in theory, but the reality is the buyer doesn't follow your playbook. They don't have your script. And so there's a different play on this. If you were to focus 80% of your energy, your prospecting energy, on identifying people who will move from passive to active looking in 6 to 36 months' time, okay? In 6 to 9 months' time, all of your short-term pipeline problems will have disappeared, because many of those people who are in the 40% will start dropping in. But now you'll have had a dozen conversations with people, and you'll have had a chance to build credibility and prove reliability and relevance and timeliness, and you're not just another fucking interruption. Okay? Because the way most salespeople pitch is it's just invasive. Hi, let me tell you in 30 seconds why I'm calling, and then okay, and that's fine. Okay? But if I'm not in buying mode, you're just an interruption. But if you lead with, Jack, been speaking to a lot of CFOs at the moment, and top 3 priorities for them are obviously mitigating risk, capital protection, and growth. But they're all telling me that they're really under pressure to try and find savings. But what it's meant is that the important but not urgent projects that they know are crucial to the success of the future of the business are having to be put on hold. Tell me something. Is that a conversation you and your VP of Finance and CEO are having?
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me something. I'm not certain, but chances are there's a lot of stuff that you know that you're auditing, and probably tech, that you know you're not using all the functionality. But if you knew what you were using and what you weren't, you'd be quite happy to go back to the vendors and say, here's a check for 70%. Turn off the other stuff. We don't need it. And
Definitely.
knowing for certain. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Would that be a conversation worth having for 2 more minutes?
Absolutely.
Excellent. Let's do that. That's very different to me pitching. Yeah. Because that's what Challenger is all about. The problem is with Challenger, a lot of people misuse it and they use it as a cudgel. Yeah, beating people over the head. Doesn't work. So find out what people really want. You've got to do your research. So you asked about trends. I think I've interviewed a bunch of CFOs, and what they all say, without exception, is know my industry. Okay. Now, how many reps actually bother to know the industry?
Yeah, few and far between.
Know the competitive set, the landscape in which they operate. Where does this company fit? Who are their customers? What are their strengths? What are their relative strengths? What's the weakness in their competitors' strengths? One of my favorite ways into any organization is, Zach, I've been doing some research on you and a couple of your competitors, and it's really interesting. These guys are very strong in here and here. Have you ever worked out what the weakness is in that strength?
It's a good question. I don't know if I have.
Okay. Look, not worth a 15-minute more formal chat when you've got a bit more time, is it?
Yeah, I don't see why not.
So now I've done a bit of research. I know just enough. Well, I can use my network. I can use the technology. If the database, the CRM, or whatever single source of record you have is any good, that should be gold mine. But the reality is basically full of shit. I mean, all of my RevOps partners say that if they go into a CRM and it's more than 20% decent data, they're stunned.
Wow.
And you work with your clients, let's be honest, okay? How many times have you been into their CRM and thought, fuck me, this is really impressive?
No, never.
Right. Okay. Why? Because they haven't put the thought in. Because what they did was they bought something as a reaction. Because the way most tech has been bought is a reflex, and it's out of fear. It's an arms race. Zach's just bought Gong, so I need to buy something. Oh, well, shall I buy Gong? No, it's a bit Clary, Ebster. Oh, what we go with? Yeah. Okay. So they start thinking and you end up with this technology mishmash, this tech spaghetti. I worked with a client in the finance sector, and up until their ops and VP of sales got their heads together and created a single dashboard, every rep, 50 of them, were spending 2.5 hours a day navigating their tech stack just to be able to do their job. Imagine what having this single dashboard where all the data can be gleaned and accessed and added to has created for them. That's 150 hours of prospecting time, planning time, strategy time, customer-facing time, study time, going home and shagging whatever you like, okay? All of those are options that you don't have to spend dicking around because your tech's in the way.
Yeah?
Yeah. So wherever you have any motion or any activity where the failure rate is north of 50%, but in sales and marketing, north of 80 to 95% would be a good starting point because most of them have those failure rates. And we tolerate that shit as acceptable. My arse. I mean, that's investors' money. If I was an investor, I would be livid that you dare to waste my money that way. And another one, the turnover, recruitment. 1 in 10 makes it to the end of year 2. The failure rate is, out of 10 hires, 3 might make it to the end of year 1, 1 makes it to the end of year 2. What a waste. The human cost is obscene. None of that needs to happen. Do a better job. Stop being lazy as managers. Yeah? If you want to really improve things, improve the middle layer of middle management. These people have 7, 8, 10 people reporting to them. Half of them are accidental managers. You know, in the UK, there are 2.4 million accidental managers that have an average of 7 to 8 people reporting to them. That's 16.4 to 18.8 million people. That's half the UK's adult workforce reports to someone who was scoffing their Weetabix one morning, and they were tapped on the shoulder and said, "Zach, can I have a word?" Oh shit, am I getting fired? Zach, I've got some bad news. We've had to fire your idiot boss. The good news is you're now the idiot boss. Off you go, congratulations. And that's your runway. Now, what do? You do what was done to you, or you do what you think is right, neither of which are particularly well informed. And you're putting those fuckers in charge of 7, 8, 10 salespeople. And what do they then do? They beat down on them. They try and motivate them. So what do? You set up competitions where Mike always wins the fucking both speakers. Because he wins every month, so no one's even remotely motivated to participate. You fuck around with the comp plan, thinking that we're going to make it more interesting, and all you do is you make avaricious tossers more wealthy, and all the decent people who would keep you customers, remember 1,150% versus 18%, money you can actually spend, not money you make, but money you keep, yeah? You end up recruiting a culture of arseholes. The entire tech environment has propagated greed is good. Me first. And you've got all these people. Look at the number of people in tech who are succeeding, who have some kind of personality defect that results in drug abuse, sex abuse, thrill-seeking, alcoholism, risk-taking, exercise beyond any form of any reasonable person. Why? Because they're trying to fill a hollow. How many people listening to this today are thinking, I hate what I have to do, but I have to do it to keep my bosses and my job happy, keep my bosses happy, keep my job, fit in, be successful. And they start to compromise. Well, after a while, that eats into your soul. And it doesn't have to be that way. And I have enormous optimism and faith that your generation is going to do the right thing and turn over the shit that my generation and the generation before has inflicted on you.
Well, let me ask you, so tech was actually one of the questions I was going to talk about, maybe what had gone wrong in tech. You know, every day there's a post about more redundancies, more layoffs, more changes, and we've alluded to maybe some of the things that are the problems, but what's the other side of it? How do we get out of that if we're in a tech company right now?
The causes of that, the money behind a business will permeate the culture behind it. Okay? Now, your challenge here is that if these tech companies are VC or private equity funded, things turn to shit the minute the founders lose sight of why they originally started the business. Okay? Why did you two start We Have a Meeting?
It's a great question. Do you want the honest answer?
I want the honest answer.
I was coming to the end of a job role and thought, I cannot have another boss. I've got children on the way, and I wanted to cut the middleman out and take the lion's share for myself. Right,
okay. So there was a real motivation there that was personal, okay, and strongly emotional.
Yeah.
Were you ever once motivated by making your shareholders in the companies that you were employed in richer?
Yeah.
Really? You came to work excited about making these wealthy people wealthier?
Yeah. That's why I should not feel like that.
Okay. You're the first person in 35 years I've ever heard.
There's not everyone, if I'm honest with you, it's not every, like if we've worked with a big blue chip company that's sat on a big pile of money anyway, but we do work with businesses who do create things that...
No, I'm not talking then, I'm talking about now. I'm not talking about now, I'm talking about back then.
Oh, back when I was in the trenches salesperson.
Start the business.
Yeah, no, not at all.
Right, okay. Right, there you go. So the lie that private equity and venture capital spin is that, and it comes from Milton fucking Friedman, is that all businesses exist to serve shareholder value. No, they don't. You set this business up, and the reason you're succeeding is because you solve a problem for some people.
Yeah.
The minute you lose sight of that, and you start worrying about raising funding, and you worry about the next valuation number for this quarter and the implications of that, you lose sight of the reason you exist. Yeah. Now, when you first start out and where you are at the moment as a business, chances are you will attract a tribe of people who buy into your value system. But as the business starts to grow, yeah, how do you maintain that feeling that we're all working towards common purpose? Because it's a wonderful experience, isn't it? Yeah. Now, what if we were working with our customers towards a shared common outcome that we were all working towards? We had common purpose. So again, I've started partnering up with another one of my partners, alineup.com. Check them out. They've created a war room environment where I can bring my partners, my customers, and my team, and we can all work on my customer's problem together with all the assets in one place. And I can create private rooms so they can go off and talk their stuff. We can talk our stuff, and people have permission to get whatever they need. I mean, this is just amazing what technology can do. I've been looking for this for 15 years. I discovered it 2 weeks ago. I've never been so excited. We're on the cusp of a renaissance. The renaissance happened when there was a lot of turmoil and change. We've just had COVID, which was a brilliant catalyst for all of this because it moved the whole world forward 10 years in terms of digitization. And we realized we've now got the entire globe as our talent base. I mean, from my perspective, the people who are thinking we've got to get people back in the office, they're all about command and control. That's not how you're going to succeed in the new economy. How you're going to succeed is learning how to cooperate, learning how to coordinate and work together with common purpose, and all of you looking at the same problem through different lenses, so you end up with a much more elegant solution with very few or no negative unintended consequences downstream. Yeah. And you work together to elevate each other. That's how it really works in the real world. That's how human beings have got to the top of the food chain. But the problem is that we've got this old industrial age model, which is that we compete, we carry very sharp knives, or we coexist reluctantly, so we have very sharp elbows as we chase to the finish line, and we'll do anything to get ahead, and we'll take advantage. Yeah. Or we collaborate, but we don't really collaborate. What we do is we have our partners at arm's length because we don't really trust them. We don't give them our really good stuff. We don't tell them who the customer is because we don't trust the vendor. Well, that's an indictment of you as a channel manager or partner if your partners won't tell you who the customer is and tell you who the individual is. That's about trust. And all of this stuff, the tech, is a distraction. I know people who are absolutely creaming it, $100 million a year in sales, and they've got a telephone. The tech is an enabler, but it's become this the focus of attention. And what's gone wrong, in my opinion, is it starts with the funding, but then it's going for the easy to measure win. So RevOps and enablement have become technical departments. Human beings put the ink on contract. At the moment, it's not my AI selling to your AI. It's one human being selling to another, and some human being has to make the emotional leap that they're going to put their signature on a contract, and the ramifications of which could be disastrous if they're wrong. My clients sell big ticket stuff. It's enterprise, it's strategic, it starts at 6 figures, goes up to 9 figures. Yeah? I mean, that's a lot of money. In fact, I've done a 10-figure deal with a client. And when people are making those really monumentally important decisions, what they're thinking is, what if it goes wrong? This could be my career. My kids, I can't put them through school. I can't feed them, put clothes on their back, put a roof over their head. That's the reality of how people are behaving and what they're thinking about. 15 to 20% of the way through the buying when they interact with the salesperson, that's what's going through their mind. They don't need to hear about another widget, another feature benefit. They don't need you to ratchet up their pain. What they need is a human being to understand them. You remember I said sales nobility? Well, sales nobility starts with the right intent. When I show up, when I'm speaking to a future prospect, I am thinking, are Zach and Jack going to be a customer in 20 years' time? Can I help them? If I can, am I the best possible person to help them for where they are now? If I can't, I have to recommend somebody else. If I can, how do I move the conversation forward? What do I have to do? What do they need to see, hear, or have happen so they volunteer and invite me forward? How do I make it so that they want me beside them on their journey throughout, because they feel safer with me next to them than without me? Because that means I always can get to the finish line. And if I'm doing my job right, by the time I get to the end, I will already have 12 to 20 solid champions, raving fans, advocates, people who need what I have, fifth columnists who feed me information. Just to let you know, Challenger were around last week, and they were speaking to Zach. You should just, they'll give you that intel. They'll share confidences that they won't share with anyone else. If you've won, they'll tell you before you've won it. Yeah. Everyone else finds out after that they haven't. You find out before. No one finds out at the time.
I think that's a nice segue to change lanes slightly. So let me ask you this. So if I'm a graduate salesperson, I've got no experience, I've never read a sales, but I don't know where to start.
Fabulous. Yeah.
And you've got to coach me and train me up to be a sales machine in a relatively short window of time. Where do you start with me?
Okay, first thing I would do is teach you the Jimmy Carr rule.
Which is?
How far can I go on the podcast?
As far as you want.
Okay. Jimmy Carr, I was watching him in an interview, and it was just after Sean Locke had died. And he was talking about that. And I can't quite remember the context, but he said this. And he said, look, if you turn up and you meet 3 cunts by 12 o'clock, you're the cunt. And the rule is don't be a cunt. Okay. If you want a variant of that. So the rule is if you meet 3 nasty people by 12 o'clock, you're probably the person at fault. So don't be an arsehole. Okay. And the reality is, the first thing is be a decent human being. It doesn't mean be a doormat, but what it does mean is show up and recognize this other person is not thinking about you, your company, your product, your quota, your target, or anything that you need. They're not worried about that. What they need is they need an ally. They need someone who's going to show up and have their back. Because as they look around, it's a scary place. Most of them are children trapped in adult bodies, as you and I are. I mean, how many of you grew up beyond the age of 12 or 15? Inside, you think, how the fuck did I end up here? Mortgage, kids, credit cards, car payments, boss I don't like, job I don't like, holidays I don't really want to go on, house I'm not happy in. Yeah? And I come home at night and drown my sorrows. Weekends, I numb myself. Is that the future I envisioned for myself when I was a happy 8-year-old running around asking, why is the sky blue, Daddy? No. But why is it that, given that you only have one crack at the whip that you're certain of, most people spend it in trance, miserable, looking forward to being able to be out of trance and obliterated? What a waste. So you're a graduate. First thing I would do is look at your values. And I would look for people whose history is your future. So look for people who are great thought leaders, and don't look for the ones who have the glitz and the big followings. Look for the people who people speak kindly of because they are genuine, they're authentic. And what you want to do is start mapping out a list of a couple of hundred good sales managers. To find 200 will be a lifetime. I kid you not. You'll be lucky to find 6% that are good managers in sales. And that's from a study done in 2018. 94% are not fit for purpose. Not because they're bad, it's because they just don't know any better. And they're in environments where they're being asked to do things and their default setting is panic and do the wrong thing. These are people who would like to do better, which is why 60% of managers today in sales suffer from a health-threatening, stress-related condition. Wow. Now, what's that tell you about the founders and the investors having a very short-term perspective? So you've got to think long-term. You've got to think, I'm long-term selfish. I'm interested in the customer's best interests first. If I can't deliver to those, then I have no business being in the sale. So the first book I would recommend you listen to is a book by Mark Goulston, Goulston, called Just Listen. It's a must read. If you can't listen, you never ever get to understand the transfer of meaning. And you can never transfer meaning effectively. Because real self-awareness is understanding your impact and effect on others. So being able to read the room is key. I would read Building Trust by Darryl Stickle, Darrylstickel, and I would get his course on building trust. His company is called Trust Unlimited. I think it's trustunlimited.com. I would follow and I would watch everything that Moeed Amin has put up on the internet. His YouTube channel is an absolute goldmine. He deciphers the reports and accounts of 100 different companies on there. Now, the reason I say this is if you are a salesperson in selling anything that is over a budget spend that a CFO is going to have even the remotest interest in, if you do not speak the language of finance going forward, you are, and this is the technical term, royally fucked. Okay? You've got to learn the language of finance, because finance, especially going into this market, recession, downturn, inflation, high interest rates, you've got to be able to sell your message internally. And most of the people who you think would be great champions have zero financial credibility in front of the finance people. So you need to help them and coach them. And Moeed's channel is just a gem for that. I would also follow Bilal Batrawi, the no fluff sales guy. Love what he does. Smart, articulate, very much about building you up as a human being. Jason Bay, like his stuff. So this is all for SDRs. I would pay attention to people like Zach Selch, and if you're doing anything in international, Zach, Z-A-C-H, Selch, S-E-L-C-H. Jack's a lovely Jewish boy from Chicago who's been taking money from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for the last 35 years. The only way out of Zach's network is in a box. That's his quote. It's just a diamond. He's one of the most interesting salespeople you'll ever meet. He's sold in over 150 countries, I think now. And he's got a resource, 112 countries, who's done a breakdown of culture, business practices, things to do, not to do, places to go, food, all that kind of stuff. And that's all available on video. And read widely about human beings, understand human nature, understand heuristics. That's a good starting point. Understand micro-expressions. Read up different sales methodologies, but don't get too enamored by the dogma of them. Okay. I spent 16 years with Sandler. It was brilliant. My problem with all of these systems, and it's not singling Sandler out, is that it becomes dogma. And dogma isn't real world. The way real buyers buy is they don't buy in the order of the submarine. If they want to talk about money, I'll talk about money. If they want to talk about decision, I'll talk about decision. If they want to talk about objections, I'll talk about that. Because the buyer leads. The problem is, when you first start out, these systems are great, so you have some structure. And I was taught, always sell from your nurturing parent and from your adult, but leave your critical parent and your child in the car. Now, what that means is that you don't bring that kid in because it needs to be under adult supervision in the sale. You don't have enough time. I disagree. I think if you're properly researched, properly rehearsed, properly prepared, then you definitely want the kid in there. Because the kid is where your curiosity comes from. Now, in TA, transactional analysis, we talk about the child in three forms. The little professor, the adaptive child, and the rebellious child. And then we have a fourth one, which is the natural child. Now, the first three live in the drama triangle. The drama triangle describes every broken, dissatisfying, dysfunctional relationship you can or will ever have on 3 points of the triangle. Victim, why me? It's so unfair. Save me. Persecutor, you piece of shit. You always, you never, you're such a. Yeah. The bully. Okay. And then the rescuer, who's the most divisive of all. They help without boundaries or permission. They're mollycoddling. They tolerate non-performance. They're permissive. Yeah. That's the worst type of manager because they end up micromanaging. And then they complain about how hard done by they are. Oh, it's so unfair. I'm working so hard. No one understands. Everyone brings me their problems. And then they become a persecutor because they go around the triangle. So I teach people to stay out the triangle and operate from the winner's triangle. It's equally elegant. That means you never end up in a fight. Instead of being a victim, you're vulnerable. Instead of being assertive, persecuting, you're assertive. And instead of being a rescuer, you're nurturing and empathic. What this means is that you can always, no matter how much pressure people are throwing at you, if you can just stay calm enough to stay in there, and you rehearse and you practice. And this is why we do pre-mortems. This is why we have the practice labs. Because I want to make sure you've lived it before. I don't want you going in and practicing in front of the customer. That's what amateurs do. Real professionals, we turn up and we've lived it all before. I love rehearsing sales. And then my clients come out and say it happened exactly word for word. They said exactly what you said they would. Of course they did. Human beings are predictable. Nothing that we do, nothing is... there'll be the occasional thing that is slightly anomalous, but that's just because we didn't ask enough of the right questions or look for the right data. But everything now has become, it's about data and technology, and that's not what human beings do. Human beings buy, human beings decide, human beings sell, and that's what we've got to come back to.
There's loads there to unpack. And it always happens whenever we speak to you. There's always a feeling of this could go so many different directions.
Sorry.
But I will have to... I love it. It plants so many seeds for me and probably for the listeners as well. I wanted to finish on some rapid-fire sales questions, pulling on that experience that you've got. So just rapid-fire stuff. What's the best qualifying question that no one's asking?
It comes in two parts.
Okay.
And imagine it's, and you take them into the forward. So it's a future pacing one. So imagine it's 3 years from now, Zach, and everything's gone according to plan. Describe what that looks like, what it feels like, what's going on, and what's happened to get you there. Take me there. So I want them to take me into the future. Okay. And then I'm going to say, and I learnt this one from a therapist. That's why I love this podcast that I do. Because I'm bringing, again, diversity. The importance is range. And it was a wonderful question. It says, so what's good about that? Not why, but what's good about that? You see what happened? He leaned in. And that's what I want. I want my people I'm working with to lean in, because now I've got their curiosity. And they're going to tell me everything that I need to. Now what I want to do is they'll paint me this picture. Okay, so compared to where you want to be, where are you now? That's the pain gap. There's a delta there between X and Y by when. Okay, so now we've got a timeline. I'm going to work with them to work back in stages. So we've got milestones. So we know what we're working towards. Now we've got common purpose. But have you noticed now I'm their ally and we're co-developing the solution? I haven't sold them anything. I haven't even told them what I'm selling. I mean, one of my favorite war stories is when I turned up in Hong Kong and the CFO and the CEO met me and they said, Marcus, really been looking forward to this, been looking forward to meeting you, looking forward to this. What have we bought? Bear in mind, the money was already in my account 12 weeks beforehand, and I charged them 56 times the incumbent's rate, and they'd raised the purchase order, but they hadn't issued it yet. My wine at the Hong Kong club cost more than Tony, the other guy's training, for 3 days. Yeah. But what I didn't do was sell them training. They didn't even know it was training. I mean, they knew broadly it was training because they looked at my website, but that was about it. We never talked about the ins and outs because it wasn't necessary.
Okay, great one. Next one. Take this any angle that you want to take it. Email objection. What's best practice to deal with an email objection? You're on a cold call. You're speaking to someone for the first time, and they request either an email at the start of the conversation or at the end of the conversation. How typically should people be thinking about that objection?
I feel I owe you an apology, Zach.
Go on.
Well, if you're asking me for an email at this stage in the conversation, clearly all this has been is a massive interruption. I'm so sorry. Would you like me to hang up?
No. I just need an email first before I decide if we do anything else.
Okay. Well, what would you like to see in the email?
I suppose just everything that you've talked about so far, maybe some commercials behind it as well. And
okay. And if I send that to you, what are you going to do with it?
I will circulate it with the relevant people and then get back to you if we're interested.
That makes perfect sense. Okay. Can I ask you a very cheeky question?
Yeah, of course.
On the basis of the conversation we've had so far, is this something that if the tech stacks up, the security stacks up, and it's affordable, based on what you and I have talked about today, is there any reason why you wouldn't want it?
Not me personally, no.
Okay. Now, in order to give you the email that's going to actually have the result that you want, my question is this: would you want it if it does all the things that we talked about?
Yes.
So I'm going to be really cheeky now. If you have no doubts, because in the next couple of conversations we have, I demonstrate to you that you can have confidence in our solution, can I ask you to be my champion?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, if it can help us, absolutely.
Excellent. Okay, now isn't that better than just sending them a shitty email?
10 times better. Yeah, absolutely. The pattern interrupt around that you're apologising first as well is superb.
I want them to be my champion. I want a champion. Let's get a positive outcome that works for both of us. Yeah. So when I'm thinking of partnering, I'm always thinking, what does my partner want to sell more of, and how do I help them sell more of that? So what does my customer want? Because they're all going to be different. If you think about where they are in their buying journey, some of them will be making space. Others will be at the point where they really want a decision. But the company may not be at that place. Because if you're selling enterprise and procurement is strategic, they're looking at all these different pain areas within the business and they're seeing how they can combine them. The finance department is looking at what can we consolidate? What can I buy in to replace 5 other things? How can I have one point choke to throat to choke, sorry, and what can I do to simplify my life? Yeah. So as a seller, I think we need to we need to think differently. We need to think, how do I get this person promoted? How do I stop them from getting fired? How do I make their life simpler, easier, more certain? So remember, uncertainty is an absolute killer. People don't fear change, they fear uncertainty. There was a meta-study of 330 studies on mankind's greatest fear. And the number one that came out of it was the future, because with it comes uncertainty. But if people are certain of what change will bring, and they want that change, they're okay with it. Because perceived risk is driven by vulnerability times uncertainty. So when we're uncertain, our default setting is worst case scenario. We catastrophize. So another fabulous book by Kerry Patterson is How to Be Miserable. It's 40 ways that you're probably making yourself miserable. Because at that level, entry level, graduate, first job, you don't know what the fuck you're doing. You're ignorant. And that's not a bad thing. It just means you don't know any better. It's not a judgment. Okay? Your job is to get better. So improve by 0.5% a day. Keep a journal and capture a minimum of 3 good lessons a day. And teach them to someone else within 24 hours. The rule is teach once, learn twice. Yeah?
Beautiful.
Now,
So
do that and go out and find managers whose history is your future, and then lead with this in mail. Jack, cheeky ask, heard great things about you as a manager, believe your history is my future. Would you be my mentor for 15 minutes a month? And then you list out the conditions. I'll never bring you a problem I haven't tried to fix myself. I'll always bring 3 attempts to fix it and the lessons of failure. And I'll be after your direction on what I can learn from that and what you would do in that circumstance. And at any point that I fail to meet those conditions, you can fire me.
amazing.
Now, get a dozen of those going, you'll already have your next job lined up. Yeah? Because you'll have picked your next boss. You're headhunting your next boss. And that's the key. You need to find a horse to ride.
Yeah.
If any of you are looking for great bosses, Teddy Peck has just hired someone who I put in his way. He would be a fantastic boss. There are people like David Weiss, Tom Castley. These are the kind of people you want to get to know. Then find fantastic leaders and follow them. Yeah? And have those people be your mentors and fill your head with good stuff. Can I say this without... I'm not a fan of people who are selfish, self-orientated, self-aggrandizing, greedy fuckers. Okay? I don't believe that sales should be brutal. I think it should be a partnership. And I don't believe in this bro culture. I think all of that is horseshit. It's a distraction. And we need way more women in sales and in leadership. And when you have a more even balance, people tend to make less stupid decisions and people stay longer. Okay? And the biggest argument for diversity is diversity of thought. And the best thing any organization can do, and if you're a young founder, make sure you have a mix of people. Okay, don't recruit in your own image. Recruit people who make you uncomfortable. Recruit people who disagree with you. Go out and look to add those people in your network. Do not live in a bubble, because you can never get bipartisan solutions. Now, if you look at the politics of today, it's now dangerous for anyone on the left or right to associate with someone from the other side. Now, when you have both sides reaching across the divide and coming up with compatible solutions and working out what a real win-win is, and a real win-win is not both sides are happy eventually. It's both sides are happy eventually and neither side ended up compromising. That's bloody difficult. Yeah? But that takes effort and work. And if you're in a hurry, you'll forget that. But remember, at the end of the phone is a customer who is a living, breathing human being with emotions and a life and family and kids and all of that stuff. And if you make your selfish self-interest the primary objective of that call, they're never going to give you the time of day. They might listen politely. They won't. They'll never trust you. And that's what I want. I want customers who say good things behind my back. I want people to say, when anyone says who or what was the single biggest, most positive impact or influence on your life, my name comes out of their mouth before they've had a chance to think. That's the kind of work I want to do. I don't want to be someone when they talk about me, they say, yeah, he was a bit of a twat. He lied. He stole. He misled. He exaggerated. He withheld important information. He sold me a pup. And that's not the person I want to be remembered for.
No, of course not. So based on that, if someone did want to work with you, they're listening to this and they're thinking, how do I get this guy involved in my career or my business? Where's the best place for them to start? What have you got available?
There'll be a Calendly link that'll be attached to this. I'll send it to you guys, and they can book a 45-minute initial coaching session. I normally charge 600 quid. This one I charge 300, and I split the fee. And it's a money-back guarantee. If you don't think you got value from it, I'll give you your money back. Okay, because I want people to actually start risking getting coached. And we'll spend 45 minutes trying to answer this one question. What do you want your career to give you in life? And how do you get it? And that's all that conversation will be about. Because there is no such thing as work-life balance. There's life, and you happen to be in it in different roles. And you make decisions and choices as to where you choose to spend that time. And you can use it well, or you can waste it. Given that you are dead for a fucking long time, and this is the only guaranteed one time you have, okay, don't waste a moment of it trying to do things the hard way when you can do things a simpler way and make different mistakes. Okay, the stuff that you're going to make mistakes on at the moment, if you're a new rep, is you're going to think it's a numbers game because some idiot will have told you that lie. You'll think that you have to talk features and benefits because no one gives a fuck. They won't care about you, your company, your product. They definitely don't care to see a picture of your head office, and they don't care who your investors are. That might happen later out of curiosity. What they care about is, how do you help me solve my problem? Focus on that. Nothing else matters. Your customer and their problem. And you build everything out from there.
Beautiful. That was great. Like I said, I could talk to you all day about a lot of the stuff that we've gone over.
Thank you.
Beautiful, right? And I'll put all the links to everything that you're doing at the minute, as you say, Calendly link in the description for the podcast. And yeah, thank you so much.
LinkedIn is good. I'm on LinkedIn a lot. If you want to contact me via WhatsApp, if you cold call me badly and you try and peddle me some shit like lead generation, I'm working with the likes of Zach and Jack and with a bunch of other people. You better be fucking good because you're gonna get short shrift. Phone me up and talk to me about something that you've done some research and you're interested in. Okay, you think I'm going to be interested in, and we have common ground, then I'll take the call. My number is +44 7515 937 221, and my email marcus@laughs-laughs.com. If you spam me, you'll go straight into where all other email goes, because I don't read email except at 2:30 in the morning when my old man bladder kicks in. So that's when I look. You better have a really good headline that enters my workflow, because otherwise you're just getting flushed, just like what I'm doing at the time.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Marcus.
Thank you.